What's up everybody, it's your boy Digital here. So over the last week or so, I've had this constant recurring thought pounding throughout my head, one that I just can't seem to shake. It all started the other day when I was rewatching Sony Pictures' 2018 hit Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a film that doesn't need much of an introduction at this point, but deserves it nonetheless. Spider-Verse is the brainchild of American filmmaking duo Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, two filmmakers who originally hit it off while attending Dartmouth College and inevitably formed a prolific partnership working their way into becoming some of the most renowned names in animated movies today. The two are best known for their direction and writing on a variety of animated films, such as Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and The Lego Movie, whose success would eventually lead them to being handed the keys of Into the Spider-Verse. Word of the first animated film in the Spider-Man franchise concocted by the dynamic duo originally leaked in 2014 and still wasn't officially announced by Sony Pictures until the following year in April. However, Lord and Miller had a vision. They wanted their film to have its own unique style and would go on to spend countless nights and morning meetings brainstorming on how to make that vision become a reality. Eventually, they came up with the ingenious idea to combine ImageWorks computer animation with the more traditional hand-drawn techniques found in the comics that their project would ultimately be taking its inspiration from. Specifically, the work of Miles Morales co-creator Sarah Pichelli. And slowly but surely, over the upcoming years, the cast and crew grew, further pushing that dream into fruition. They acquired the likes of Shameik Moore, star of the 2015 comedy crime drama Dope, to voice the one and only Miles Morales. But Moore certainly didn't find himself in poor company, promptly being paired with two of my personal favorites, both national treasures Nicolas Cage portraying the Spider-Man Noir character and Big Mouth John Mulaney tackling the role of Piggy Porker. These acquisitions and a plethora of others similar in nature would go on to solidify the company's obvious intention to not sport a cast of up-and-comers. Nonetheless, big A-list actors weren't the only things Sony seemed willing to splurge on for their shot at entering a Disney-dominated Spider-Man universe. Requiring up to 140 animators, the team also proved to be the largest ever used by Sony Pictures Animation, turning out to be worth it though, as the movie would go on to make a total of $375 million in box office sales worldwide, more than tripling the estimated $90 million budget that it took to create the film. Somehow though, the millions of dollars made in profit wouldn't be what persisted to rattle around in my head. In fact, I don't think it was anything that Miller or Lord even intended to leave the audience puzzled at all. Still, every time I saw those shades of black and white swing across the comely colored backdrop, I couldn't help but to think, whatever happened to the film noir movies that dominated the silver screen in the 30s, 40s, and 50s? Could Spider-Man Noir be the last remaining remnant of a genre lost to the ever-changing tides of pop culture phenomenons? And perhaps the very same fate awaits the beloved superhero movies that have exploded in popularity over the last decade. All of these questions left my curiosity soaring through the roof, and so I decided it was time to dig a little bit deeper. Now, I figure the best place to begin would to be and try and answer some of the ongoing questions that have surrounded the film noir genre for years. Like, is it even a genre in the first place? While many critics do certainly refer to film noir as a genre itself, others argue that it simply can't be. To get a better idea on the matter, we can take a look at Foster Hirsch, an American film critic who defines a genre as being determined by conventions of narrative structure, characterization, theme, and visual design. You see, Hirsch, who himself has taken the position that film noir is indeed a genre, argues that these elements are present in abundance throughout the films at hand, also noting that there are specific unifying features of tone, visual style, and narrative, sufficient enough to classify noir as a distinct genre on its own. But others, however, strongly oppose these views and argue on the opposite side of the coin, or in this instance, the opposite side of the camera. To these critics, the case for those who are pro-genre doesn't seem to hold up upon further inspection. You see, it's true that film noir is often associated with an urban setting, but many classic noirs take place in small towns, suburbia, rural areas, or even on the open road, pretty much ruling out setting as the determining factor as it is with the western. And similarly, however, while the private eye and femme fatale are character types conventionally identified with noir, it stands that the majority of film noirs feature neither, leaving no character basis for genre designation as well as setting. So knowing that, plus the fact that film noir doesn't rely on anything as evident excitement as the monstrous or supernatural elements of horror films, the speculative leaps of science fiction, or the song and dance routines of musicals, there seems to be little consensus between the views of critics like Foster Hirsch and the views of those who argue against him. Now, part of the problem is that unlike any other genre of film we recognize today, film noir was a term and a sociological judgment applied after the fact, and it's quite possible that noir's popularity stems partially from the exotic name applied to what studio and production heads thought of as simple crime programs. On the other hand, however, distance can often lend perspective to trends in the offing. Still, that doesn't answer where this controversy even came from in the first place. To solve this, we have to take a look at World War I. You see, in the first decades of the 20th century, a large expressionist movement existed throughout Germany and Austria. It was this movement that birthed the German expressionism and cinematography, known for creating a renaissance in the graphic arts. Many of film noir's distinct styles, including the black and white picture with low-key lighting elements, find their roots in this German expressionism movement. But after the Great War, Germany was outright isolated from the rest of the world, ultimately resulting in foreign films being banned and an increasing demand for more domestic films to be found at home in the motherland. It was during this time that many artists living in Germany began to focus on their craft and graphic arts. In their work, these expressionists sought to assert their feelings of dissatisfaction with the existing order and their desire to effect revolutionary change. They used the visual arts to take a look into the emotional and psychological state of being by using distorted images and irregular shapes, hoping to bring the human subconscious to view without the use of literal symbols, and intending to spark an emotional reaction with their art. However, even though this form of German expressionism peaked in the early 1920s, it eventually would become widely acknowledged in the international film industry as a whole. And by the 1930s, most German filmmakers were coerced to immigrate to larger United States cities by the rising power of Hollywood, leaving the type of cinematography that German expressionists brought from overseas to find a new home in American-made films, thus building the foundation for film noir to take shape. Among these relocated filmmakers was one who would go on to leave a significant mark on the genre as we know it, a gentleman by the name of Fritz Lang. See, Lang, who had enormous success in Germany, utilized techniques taught by German expressionists, and during his time, his catalog would grow to include such films as Metropolis, released in 1927, and his first talking film, M, releasing in 1931. The latter of the two being what many consider Lang's masterpiece, containing a variety of elements in its style and plot that would later serve to define film noir as a genre. But perhaps the most important film to define film noir is Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. The film itself is not categorized with film noir, which only helps to add to the confusion, but it was one of the last films to solidify the genre. Influenced heavily by the cinematic styles brought over by the German filmmakers, Citizen Kane is recognized for its visual approach, not to mention that the plot is highly driven by multiple off-screen narrators and flashbacks to reveal the life of Charles Foster Kane, techniques that film noir drew upon greatly in the following years. Nonetheless, film noir wouldn't go on to last forever, and its demise can mainly be attributed to three key factors. The first being, as with any art form, after 2 decades of being in the limelight, its audiences began to hanker for something new. The emigres had nothing new to add to what they had offered in the years past, and most of the creative pioneers were either dead, retired, or had moved on to other types of filmmaking. The second factor being the wide introduction of colored films. Since black and white best convey the jaded worldview of noir, the majority of the newer entries seem to lose their touch. And the last, but maybe most important piece of the puzzle would be television. Film studios during that time perceived television not as an expansion in their natural market, but as an existential threat that had to be exterminated. Their collective strategy was to differentiate themselves by showing their scale and power through large budget extravaganza films. These were usually in the historic or disaster film genres, which can be seen in movies like The Fall of the Roman Empire and Towering Inferno. Notably, these epic big budget movies with even bigger advertising budgets funneled money away from the low-cost genres like noir, and this short-sighted strategy eventually led to the studio's demise. Today, noir is pretty much only seen in altered versions of itself, brought to the screen in bits and pieces by modern-day directors who handpick the specific elements of the genre that they would like to implement. These noir-inspired films produced after the 1960s are considered inspired neo-noirs. This post-noir film genre developed midway into the Cold War as a trend that would reflect much of the cynicism brought on by the possibility of nuclear annihilation. This new Frankenstein of genre introduced innovations that were not available with earlier noir films, and do continue to be made every now and then. Some of them have even gone on to become widely acclaimed movies like Chinatown, LA Confidential, or Sin City, while others have become cult classics such as The Long Goodbye and The Big Lebowski. So you're probably asking yourself, where does Spider-Man fall into all of this? And how can Rosebud share common ground with your friendly neighborhood web slinger? Created by writers David Hine and Fabrice Sapolsky and drawn by artist Carmen D. Giandomenico, Spider-Man Noir made his first appearance in Spider-Man Noir #1, released in February 2009 as the first part of a 4-issue miniseries. Standing as a part of the Marvel Universe, this alternate version of Spider-Man is a noir-themed take on the character. Peter Parker is accidentally bitten by an illegally imported and highly venomous spider while secretly investigating a smuggling ring of ancient spider statues. Instead of killing him, however, the bite gives him superhuman abilities similar to that of a spider. Sounds familiar, huh? Taking advantage of his new abilities, Parker begins to wage a one-man war against the criminal underground in New York City as a brutal and feared vigilante known as the Spider-Man. This is partly to avenge the deaths of his uncle Ben Parker and his mentor Ben Urich, who both suffered at the hands of the city's major crime lord Norman Osborn. Since his conception, the character has appeared in numerous media adaptations, including the animated film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where he is voiced by Nicolas Cage. This inevitably leads us back to my final question. Could the battle of genres finally be coming full circle? It seems to me that right now we could be observing the peak heights of the superhero movie. It might be hard to see with Endgame recently becoming the highest grossing box office movie of all time, but sometimes looks can be deceiving. Maybe it's just me, but I've noticed a slow shift occurring right before our eyes. While Disney has had a strong, long-lived run with the MCU, if history repeats itself as it very often tends to do, we may only have another decade until what we have come to know and love as superhero movies begins to fade into the history books and is replaced by the next best thing. With the recent releases of movies such as Joker, Logan, and Deadpool, and the darker, twisted turns that comic book movies seem to be going in, it's hard to think that the ball hasn't already began rolling, and that the shift isn't already here. So, I guess all we can do is enjoy it while it lasts. Alright, so that's where I'm gonna wrap this one up, guys. This was my video on how Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse could be the end of superhero movies as we know it. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think that Spider-Man Noir could be the last of a dying genre? Or do you think that film noirs are still living and breathing in films such as Blade Runner? I would love to know, so let me know down in the comments below. Also, let me know what you think my next video should be on as well. I'm always interested in hearing what you guys have to say. As always, thank you to the people who come back and leave a comment and like every single video. It really makes my day. I want to give a special thanks to the people who have subscribed and hit the notification button. We're about to hit 100 subscribers soon, so that's a big accomplishment for me. I never thought I'd see the day where I would hit 100 subscribers on YouTube. As always, it's your boy Digital Ark. I love you guys. I'll see you around next time.